Mozart was only 14 when he arrived in Rome in 1770, traveling with his father, Leopold. He was already a sensation across Europe, a child prodigy who had played for kings, queens, and noblemen. But this trip wasn't about dazzling aristocrats with his performances. This was different. This was about uncovering a secret, one that had been hidden for more than 100 years. In the heart of Rome stood the Sistine Chapel, known not only for its breathtaking frescoes, but for something even more mysterious. Twice a year, during Holy Week, a special piece of music was performed inside those sacred walls. The composition, Miserere Deus, was written by Gregorio Allegri, and it was considered one of the most beautiful choral pieces ever created. But it wasn't just its beauty that made it famous, it was the fact that it was forbidden. The sheet music was locked away. No copies were allowed to exist outside the Vatican. The Pope himself had declared it a treasure of the Church, meant to be heard only in its rightful place. Anyone caught reproducing it without permission would face severe punishment. Mozart had heard about this mysterious piece. He knew he might never get another chance to hear it in person. So, on that fateful night, he stepped into the chapel, blending in with the crowd. As the service began, the choirs' voices rose, floating through the grand space like something divine. The harmonies were haunting, the notes weaving together in a way that seemed almost unreal. The audience was mesmerized, but Mozart wasn't just listening, he was absorbing. He wasn't just enjoying the music, he was memorizing it. Every note, every pause, every rise and fall of the melody. He sat there, motionless, letting the music imprint itself onto his mind. While others closed their eyes in prayer, he kept his wide open, focused on every detail. And when the final note faded into silence, when the audience sighed in awe, he remained still. He knew exactly what he had to do. That night, back at his lodging, he lit a candle, took out a sheet of paper, and began to write. His father watched in amazement as his son, without hesitation, transcribed the entire piece. Measure by measure, note by note, he brought the music back to life, as if he had the original sheet music in front of him. He softly hummed each section to himself, checking his memory, correcting where necessary. By the time the candle had burned low, the work was complete. The forbidden music of the Vatican had been captured outside of its sacred walls for the very first time. The next evening, he returned to the chapel, listening again, making sure his transcription was perfect. A few small corrections, and now he had it. The entire piece, exactly as it had been performed. He had done something no one else had dared to do. Word spread. A boy had cracked the Vatican's musical code. A 14-year-old had accomplished something that had been considered impossible. It didn't take long before church officials found out. There was outrage. How could this sacred music have been stolen? How could a mere child have succeeded in doing what so many had failed to do? Some said he would be punished, that the Pope would have him excommunicated for defying the rules. But instead of anger, the Pope was intrigued. He wanted to meet this boy. When Mozart was summoned to the Vatican, there was tension in the air. Would he be reprimanded? Would his work be confiscated? But to everyone's surprise, the Pope did something unexpected. Instead of scolding him, he praised him. He recognized that what Mozart had done was not an act of defiance, but an extraordinary display of genius. Rather than punishing him, he honored him, awarding him the Order of the Golden Spur, a mark of distinction given to only a select few. The Vatican's greatest musical secret was no longer a secret. Thanks to Mozart, Miserere, Deus was now available for the world to hear. What had once been locked away inside the Sistine Chapel was now free, and over time, it became one of the most widely performed choral pieces in history. Mozart would go on to compose some of the most famous music ever written, leaving behind a legacy that shaped the future of classical music. But even at 14, he had already made history. With nothing but his ears, his mind, and his talent, he had taken something hidden and made it eternal. One performance, one perfect memory. That was all it took.